Bill Browder, welcome to the Cypher Brief studio. It's great to have you this afternoon.
Great to be here.
You're, of course, at the Munich Security Forum, which has been creating all sorts of headlines this week, most notably following the speech from U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. I'd just like to start by asking you, sir, what's the mood there? How can you describe the mood there amongst the attendees, in particular the European mood?
Well, I think it was quite a dramatic speech in the sense that here you had the U.S. Vice President not criticizing Russia, Iran, or China, but criticizing the UK, Germany, and Romania, and alluding to these countries being Soviet. And I think everybody who was here was really sort of either angry or scratching their heads in bewilderment, because this is the first time that there's been such a, I guess, degrading and insulting speech coming out of the United States, out of a senior position in the United States towards Europe in any living memory.
What do you think are going to be some of the immediate ramifications between the relationship between Europe and America in particular at this time, in which all eyes are watching very closely what's going to happen with the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and the United States? How is this speech going to possibly impact that from your perspective as a longtime student of Russian President Vladimir Putin? How is this new dynamic now potentially going to impact what we're going to see in the days and weeks ahead?
Well, in the Kremlin, they're dancing the jig right now because they can't believe that this speech could have been written in Moscow. On the other hand, the Europeans, who have been, the most unruly, hard to pin down, divisive group of people, are all united in their sort of, if J.D. Vance wanted to do the Europeans a favor by insulting them in such a humiliating way, it got everybody all together on one page and putting aside a lot of their differences to understand that Europe needs to be more decisive and act on their own at this point.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cypher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsecedge.com.
We've certainly seen a lot of that recent headlines talking about the increase in the need for Europe to take more of its own responsibility for defense, but that is certainly now, seems like, as you say, been supercharged by this unexpected dynamic, from the speech. What else has stood out at you so far from this year's Munich Security Conference?
Well, I think the main thing here that everybody is talking about is what's going to happen with Ukraine. Trump came up with this very, again, sort of unacceptable approach towards peace, which is to sit down with Putin without the Ukrainians and without the Europeans. And first of all, that's not going to achieve peace, because you can't have a peace negotiation if only one of the two warring parties are present in the negotiation. But I think what it also has done is it's kind of been a wake-up call that if the U.S. is going to cut off military aid for Ukraine to try to force effectively a surrender, then Ukraine is going to have to figure out how to survive without U.S. money. And one of the big themes, one of the themes that I've been talking about here at the Munich Security Conference, is the frozen Russian assets. There's currently $300 billion of frozen Russian assets, most of which are held in the European Union, and that could easily be a solution to the problem. There's no need for America to continue funding Ukraine, because Putin can fund Ukraine, and he can do so through the assets that hopefully they confiscate, that the Europeans confiscate from Russia. And so that's been a big part of my conversations, and it's been an idea which I think has really found its moment, because, of the 20 or so topics on Ukraine, this is the one that could save the day right here and right now.
And of course, we've seen a little bit of movement on that front over the last year. Can you just, for our readers and watchers in this conversation, can you just catch us up very quickly on what's been discussed to date and what you think might be possible in terms of policy towards potentially the West using some of those frozen Russian assets? How likely is it at this point?
Yeah, sure. Well, so first of all, for everyone who doesn't know the backstory, about a week after the war began, the West froze $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. And at the very beginning of the war, everyone thought the war would last a very short period of time. And as the war has dragged on, people are saying, well, okay, Russia has done, conservatively $1 trillion of damage to Ukraine, and there's this $300 billion of money that's been frozen. And so the first thought was that the money would be used to rebuild Ukraine. But as time has gone on, it's becoming clearer and clearer that Ukraine needs the money for defense before there's any rebuilding or reconstruction. And the original idea was to keep the money intact and to take the interest off that money and use that interest to help Ukraine. But now we're in the situation where if the U.S. pulls out of funding military aid for Ukraine, they're going to need a lot more money than just the interest. And so I would say that this is something which is now being actively discussed at the EU level, at the G7 level, and we'll see where it goes. But I would say there's a high probability that this is one of the elements that comes into play to save Ukraine.
And in a scenario in which there was a concerted effort and approval to use those funds, how big of a deal would this be for Moscow?
Well, I think it would be a game changer because at this point, Trump couldn't dictate the terms of Ukraine's surrender. Ukraine could carry on fighting until Ukraine wants to have a proper discussion, a proper peace settlement based on their interests. And that's something that Russia and Putin don't want at all. And this is really, it would be a game changer for Ukraine.
And in terms of the financial condition inside of Russia, we see headlines, one day that seems to suggest that sanctions have had a dramatic impact on the Russian economy, followed by headlines often the next day that say Russia's war economy is thriving, or not thriving, but strengthening, and Russia's spending more on military and defense than all of the EU combined. As someone who's studied this and knows all elements of sort of the Russian economy, what's your sense of where Russia is financially today, and how long or what the near term might hold for Russia's economy?
Well, I think Russia is in terrible shape. They have huge inflation. They have 23% interest rates. They've run down their domestic sovereign wealth fund, their rainy day fund. The economy is operating purely off the back of borrowed money, internally borrowed money, to spend on war. And they've lost all of their European customers for gas. The oil business is being decimated because of drone attacks on oil refineries. It's a bad situation there, and it's hard for me to imagine that it gets any better in any time soon. And so, this really the idea that sanctions aren't working, I think, is an idea that Putin was trying to spread so that the West would then start questioning whether we need to be tightening our own belts if they're not working, but they are.
Final question. I'd like to know from you, as you wrap up your time in Munich and we all start looking ahead, what are you going to be most observant for over the coming weeks and months? No doubt Ukraine's going to be top of mind for everyone, but just what can you leave us with?
Well, I think that the main thing we're going to be looking at is how the Trump administration ultimately decides to treat Ukraine, whether military aid continues or it stops, whether sanctions are lifted on Russia in some kind of proposed peace treaty. And then more broadly, I guess we want to see whether this nastiness that we saw yesterday with J.D. Vance is whether there's follow through from that or whether there's an attempt to patch things up.
Those are probably the things that we're all going to be paying most close attention to. Bill Browder, thank you very much for spending time with the Cipher Brief today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.